Hey friends, and welcome in to A Walk Through the Word, Daily Bread with Crystal Fry. I am your host, Crystal Fry, and this week's guest conversation is laid back and relaxed and filled to the brim with nuggets of goodness and wisdom. My guest this week is Kevin Kepple, Transformational Business Coach, Leadership Educator, and host of the Unlock Your Freedom podcast. In addition to visiting some awe-inspiring places in nature, Kevin works with business owners and executives to help them create clarity in their business, massive impact with their leadership, and freedom in their lives. Our conversation is full of gems, and we talk about everything from acceptance to judgment to letting go, abundance, lack, limitations, building awareness, and being present so that you can enjoy your life. I hope you enjoy this episode, and be sure to check out the show notes to connect with Kevin on social media, visit his website, and check out his podcast, Unlock Your Freedom. All right, friends, here we go. God's Word is powerful. The missing link is our identity in Christ. When we know who we are and who He created us to be, that is when we can truly walk in freedom. You are never alone. There is hope, and that hope is Jesus Christ. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It is just a pleasure to have you here, and I'm so excited about the conversation that we're going to have and get to share with our listeners. But before we get into that, for anyone who may not be super familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hey, what's up, everybody? Kevin Kepple. I'm a business coach, leadership educator. I'm a husband. I'm a dog dad. I'm a guy who lives in Dallas, Texas, and I love to get out in nature as much as possible. And there's not a lot of that in Dallas, so I travel a lot to find cool places to go and climb things and do fun stuff like that.
Awesome. I love that. I love that you are not limiting yourself by just what is in your surroundings. You know, you love nature, you love to be in nature, so you go find it. I love that. That's awesome. Well, Kevin, we've got a lot to talk about today, and I know it's going to be really helpful for all of our listeners, no matter what station they're in, whether they're in leadership, whether they're in business, whether they're just nature lovers like you. But as we get into all of this, my very favorite question to ask all of my guests is, how has your faith impacted your life?
Yeah, what a great question. And, how has it not? Maybe it's even a better question. But, I grew up in the church. My stepdad's a pastor, so I spent a lot of time going to church and learning about all that was good. And the one thing I remember predominantly is that I had no patience, and that was the longest hour of my week every week. I think I went to the bathroom like 5 times every church service. I was like, you can't possibly need to go again. Like, yeah, I can. These benches are hard, but and kind of moved into teenage years, and that's a whole mess for a lot of people. And I really kind of got away from faith, not intentionally. It was more just the ego started taking over, and it was more about me and what I wanted and doing things my way. And that's such a hard way to live, because you're basically cramming a square peg in a round hole. I mean, you're giving up access to, infinite intelligence, infinite love. I mean, you have all of that, as that's what we're of. And when you try to do it your way, you give all of that up, and it gets really, really hard. And I lacked the ability to say, I don't know. Literally, I couldn't say it. I had to know everything, and I really didn't know anything at the end of the day. And thankfully, around 30, I got to the point, pretty abruptly, that what, I don't want to do this on my own anymore. This is hard. Things aren't going the way I want them to go, and I just need to find a better way. And I just basically, it's like flipping a switch, and I gave it back up to God. And like, hey, I don't need the answers. I just need to know that no matter what, He's got me. And it's not about being perfect. Like, and like I've God is so graceful, thankfully, and I've made, so many mistakes, and I'll make so many more, and that's okay because, I'm seeking forgiveness, and it's not to be, it's not my perfection, it's his perfection. And, that's a pretty empowering thought for me. And so really just learn to let go of needing myself to be a certain way or needing other people to be a certain way for me to be okay. And, just letting go and letting God. And that phrase may not really land on people, because it's said so much that people don't really go deep on it. But man, there's so much power in that one thought, and you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to do it your way. And it's really cool because loneliness is something that everybody experiences, but you're never truly alone, and that's like one of the greatest gifts that we have. And not only that, it's like you're not alone, and you're backed by this phenomenally powerful source of God that can he's created everything. So there's really literally nothing that he can't help you with. So it's really beautiful.
I love that so much, Kevin. And while you were talking about that desire to know everything, to do it your way and to know everything, but you don't really know anything. It reminded me of something that a very good friend of mine gave to me to say to myself, to remind myself, because I am also a person who grew up in the church. And then, as I'm fond of saying, I've been on the path and off the path, and so far off the path, I couldn't even see it anymore, but thankfully, God has
Yeah.
continued to pursue me throughout my life and has brought me back in. But one of the things, she and I were having this conversation, and just the way he created me, I get stuck in my head a lot and I overthink, and that usually will get me stuck somewhere that I don't need to be, nor do I want to be. But I kind of feel like, well, but I need to know this answer, and I need to chase this rabbit down the hole, and I need to know everything about this thing. And she's like, Crystal, I want you to say this to yourself. I don't know, but I know the one who does. Like, you don't have to have the answers because he has all of the answers. And if he's going to give them to you, cool, he's going to give them to you. But he's not always going to give them to you because you don't need them. It is this letting go of the fact that I don't actually need all the answers. And if I had them all, I would probably be just a basket case wreck. If I knew everything, no, that's not for me to handle. So I love that
Yeah.
you say that. And I know that you probably have to help a lot of other people with that thought as well. Letting go of knowing all the answers to everything.
Yeah, I think that letting go is one of the greatest skills we can all learn to develop because, there's really two choices with every, thing that happens to us in our life. We can either, accept it and, let it flow, or we can hold on to it. And when you hold on to things, it's like this accumulation, this warehouse you build of likes and dislikes, and those are all judgments. And whatever you're judging, like that's the end of your understanding. Whether you're judging yourself as being a certain way or judging other people or situations or whatever. And again, what you judge, you can no longer understand. And man, like we get like really three kind of guarantees in the world, right? Like we're gonna die someday. Like, okay, cool, man. I think cool things happen anyways when that happens. And we're gonna pay taxes. And you know what? Things are gonna change. Those three things are guaranteed, right? And so what? And there's this myth that the unknown is scary. Like, man, you know what is scary is clinging to the known and living the same life for years or decades. That's scary. We're meant
Yeah.
to grow and evolve and change. I don't want the same things I wanted a year ago. I don't want the same things I wanted 10 years ago. And learning to let go and allow is really how you just get into flow. And it doesn't mean every day is this magical slide down a rainbow on the way to work at the unicorn ranch, but like it's so much more powerful when you can learn to let go. And again, it's a skill, and doesn't mean that you're always going to be perfect at it. But if you're trying to hold on to things, you're going to be unable to bring in new. But every time you let go, you instantly become more peace, if nothing else. And I think that is such a beautiful thought that you shared. I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And I love what you just said, about holding on to things and that kind of like being the end of it, which is so interesting because the things that we try so hard to hold on to, and they don't belong to us anyway. You think about it, we try to hold on to our money, or we try to hold on to relationships, or we try to hold on to, whatever it is, these different aspects of our lives, but they're not ours. Like, we are stewards, like they are gifts from God to us that we are meant to steward in our lifetime. And so, and this is something, my listeners know that I'm very transparent with them, and I will tell them in a heartbeat all the times that I have messed up on certain things and how long it took me to learn certain lessons. And thankfully, like you said earlier, God is gracious and he will continue to give us the lesson until we get it. But that's something that it took me a really long time to learn, was that, Crystal, this doesn't belong to you. It's not yours. Like, you may think it is, you may think that's your job, that you have that produces this income for you. You may think that that's yours, but it's not really yours, because who gave you the ability to make that income? It wasn't you. You didn't do that on your own. And anything that comes from the work that you do, that's not yours either. And so I think if we can start to shift our perspective and understanding that we are stewards of what we have. We're managers. We're meant to manage what we've been given, not hold on to it and, just hoard it. Makes me think of the parable. What is it? The parable of the talents, where, the one guy goes and buries his in the ground. And then when the guy comes back, he's like, hey, this is not this is not what you were supposed to do. Get out. Like, you can't do this. I can't trust you to do anything. So get out, and I'm going to give what you had to the dude over here who had 5 and multiplied it to 10. So yeah, have a nice day.
Yeah, that's the whole point, right? Giving, the more we grow, the more we can give. And that's why that parable is so powerful, because it's not about hoarding. And, like, I love, like, John's great, right? John's pretty straightforward and transparent. God is love. And that's pretty powerful. And so therefore we're love, right? And love is very misconstrued, obviously, these days. And unconditional love is what he's talking about. Not like, I love you if you do what I want, or if you don't do this or do that, whatever, or if you be with me. Like, that's attachment, which is a near enemy of love, right? It kind of feels like love, but if you're in a relationship and somebody decides they want to leave, and then you do bad things, say bad things about them, that's not love, that's attachment. And it's the same thing with the things that come and go in our lives, whether it's talents, looks, whatever. Like, it's all temporary. And when you try to hold on, you, like, put yourself in the past. And if you're stuck in the past, your two rewards are going to be generally guilt and depression. And if you stay stuck in the future, which I've been guilty of that in the past, it's just too much forward tripping, and there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that, because there's nothing we could do about the future. I mean, yeah, we can prepare ourselves in the present, but it's so important just to learn to really be still, because when you're still, you're silent. And Herman Melville said it really brilliantly: God's only voice is silence. And that's why like, we pray, we talk to God all the time, but when are you still and silent and listening to him?
Oh, I love that. I love that. I did an episode not too long ago about that very thing. We're really good about sending our prayers out, about sitting down and, praying for this or talking to God about this, and, putting out all of these things, even praise, all of these things that go out. But how often do you sit down and just listen? Because if you ask the question, how are you ever going to get a response if you don't wait for it, if you don't sit and listen to it? And, sometimes there have been times in my life when I have asked the question and I didn't even get it all the way out before I had an answer. And, and I knew that that was the Holy Spirit speaking directly to me about this thing. And I kind of felt like he was like, good grief, I've been waiting forever for you to ask the question, so I could give you the answer.
Yeah.
But then there have been other times where I've just been in this place where I keep asking and I keep asking and I keep asking. And then I'll finally get that nudge that says, be quiet so I can tell you.
Ooh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. There's a church that my brother and his family go to, and I'll go with them sometimes. It's not too far, and they do like once a month man church. And so for the dudes, and they'll have a dude speaker in there, and this, I can't remember the guy's name, but he wrote a book called Two Chairs, and his mom had taught him like this when he was a kid. And he's like, every morning just sit in one chair and have an empty chair across from you, and that chair is for him. And you need to ask questions and then just listen for a set amount of time. And I don't remember what the time was. He said I think he's like 5 minutes of silence, and that's a long time to be silent, right? For most people, they're like 5 minutes. It doesn't sound like long. Then you sit down, and you're like, oh my god, how long has it been? Like 5 seconds. And
Yeah.
and I don't think there's like one way to do it, but I just think that it's important, like you said, like if you're asking questions, like like listen for the answer. Well, why wouldn't you? Because there's a lot more intelligence behind that answer than it's going to come from your finite mind. No matter how much your mind has a beginning and has an end. But God is omnipotent, so like, why wouldn't you want to leverage omnipotent love? Because love is maybe not always going to give you the answer you're looking for, but it's always going to give you the answer you need. So it's really powerful.
And that is an excellent point. As we sit and we listen, or as we begin to practice that, because these are all skills, being able to sit in silence. If you ever start a meditation practice where you're actually just sitting still so that you can hear, so that you can clear things out of your mind, so that you can actually hear the voice of God, or however it is that he speaks to you. God and I have a very interesting relationship. I'm 100% certain that he created me in part for comic relief, because I know he laughs at me all the time. And that's cool because, I understand that now. But when we sit down and we practice it, and we get a little better at it, we get a little better at it, we get a little better at it, we also have to remember that, number one, like you said, we're not always going to get the answers that we want. And a lot of times we don't get the answers that we want because, oh, let's face it, his ways are higher than our ways, and our wants are usually kind of shallow. So, but we also need to remember that they may not come the way that we expect them to either. It may not come in that quiet time where you hear something. It may come as an image. It may come while you're driving down the road. It may come, at some other point in time. Someone else may have to be involved with it, but it's learning to discern where the Holy Spirit is leading you. And however that looks for you, because my prayer is always, God, speak to me in a way that I will understand. Because the way that I understand may be completely different from the way that, Kevin, you understand, and the way that he speaks to you. And if he speaks to you the way that he speaks to me, you might miss the message. You might miss what he's trying to tell you. And he knows that. So he's going to speak to us in a way that we are going to get it if we learn how to listen. And like I said, that listening can look differently. God speaks to me a lot in music, because that is just something that, for me, it's always been incredibly powerful for me. It's always been very impactful for me. I have a very, very wide range of love of music, like across the whole spectrum, like from Mozart to, stuff that I probably shouldn't listen to. But, it's all over the place and it's everywhere. But that is something that God has always used to tell me things that he needs to tell me, or he will just simply, tap me like, Crystal. Like, I told you this 17 times already, but that's okay. I'll tell you again because I know that I need to. So here it is, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to be as humble as possible. And humility is, to me, being able to see the good and the value in other people and their ideas. And that includes God in that too. If you're so adamant that your way is the only way, you're in a lot of trouble. But that's one of the prayers. It's like, God, please help me to be humble enough to just see what you want me to see, and whatever that looks like. And it can come through people, or it can come through music, it can come through nature, it can come from inside. And I was this weekend, I was in Washington. I was actually climbing Mount Rainier, and it was like a 3-day trip, and there was 8 people, and one of them was my brother, and I didn't know any of the people. And there was three women, and one of the women was almost 60, and that was like a pretty like intense climb. You know, you're carrying a really heavy pack and going up like in altitude, and she was awesome, and she was so just open about everything. And it was hard for her, I could tell, but she never complained once. And she was so excited about life. And she just asked really beautiful questions, and she was so free, and she just like did not care. And there was no inner critic. And it was so empowering to watch her just like living life. And she's like, man, like this is awesome. And I could tell looking at her physically, like it was not awesome. Like she was like really, really hurting because it was hard. I was hurting. And she was so cool. And she was just like really interested in other people and just like full of love and joy. And, you know, joy is just like love expressed really. And it was really, really cool to see somebody just being 100% authentic. And, you know, I think that's a rare thing. And, you know, I get to work with a lot of leaders, and I think authenticity is one of the most important traits. And it's like, you know, being consistent to your values and, you know, true to who you say you are. It's not perfect, but, you know, just doing better when we make mistakes and just, you know, showing up the way we say we're going to show up and showing up the way we want other people to show up for us.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. And as we look at it from a perspective of authenticity, and like you said, you work with a lot of leaders, and that is one of the big things is how can you how can you be an authentic leader? How can you be true to who you are, to your values, to what you believe, and lead people in an authentic way? And so as people come to you with those questions, Kevin, how do you guide them?
Sure. That's a great question. You know, I think it's so crucial that everybody understands what their core values are first and foremost. You know, like what's important to me. And, you know, the core values give you boundaries. And this is what is and isn't acceptable, you know, from me and from, you know, the way that we, you know, do what we do. And, you know, for us, it's freedom, abundance, grace, and respect. And that's like everything we do runs through that vein. And, you know, with the people that I work with, it's first and foremost, it usually start with, you know, what do you want and why? Because we need to figure out, you know, where's the passion, which is great, but passion can be selfish at the end of the day too. And so that's where the why comes in. That's the purpose. You know, how do you mix generosity into this passion you have? You know, so what do you want? Why do you want it? And then the ego wants to know how, right? How? I'm like, don't worry about the how. You know, when your why is big enough, the how will emerge. That's Viktor Frankl. And, you know, I think that's so beautiful because you know what? There's a lot of things I've done that I had no idea that's how I was going to do it. But if I, you know, demand to know the how, I would have done it in some, you know, finite way from my thinking mind. And so, you know, once we get really clear on that and really understand, you know, the values that are important, it's about really creating coherence internally because so many people just rely on the mind and they try that top down approach. And that's dangerous because your mind, you know, that the ego is fear based and it says to you that the unknown is scary. And if you're not going into the unknown, you're not creating anything. You're just reacting to what's in front of you. And so really, you know, it starts with like the gut, and the gut is where, you know, instinct is and you know that inner knowing. And then, you know, once it kind of goes through there, it's like moving to the heart and you know, find love and the energy behind that love because that's your power right there. And then you go into the mind for your logic and your planning. Like that's the last stop. And so, you know, loosely, that's kind of how we roll with the leaders that you know we're lucky enough to work with.
I love that. And it reminds me of my good friend that I mentioned earlier who gave me the thing to say, I do not know, but I know the one who does. Because while I get stuck in my head, she's like, Crystal, you have to come from your gut. Like that's where it starts. Like for you, like your intuition is good. Trust it, But as we go through life, unfortunately, and this is something I've tried really hard not to do with my children because I know how it impacted me growing up. We tend to unknowingly put limitations on our children. And, I know that was the case for me. I had very well-meaning parents who loved me very much, but we don't always have an understanding of how powerful and impactful our words are. And when you tell a small child who only sees the world as a child does, who does not have an adult understanding, when you tell them that they can't or that they shouldn't or that this is not what we do type of thing, when it comes to like their dreams and aspirations and things like that, you unknowingly you block them off. you give them a hard stop that says, oh, well, I can't go there. I can go here, but I can't go there. And to put that in perspective, when I was little, I wanted to be a singer. I actually, this is so funny. And I get tickled every time because I was like 4 or 5 years old. I told my mom I wanted to be Tina Turner when I grew up. I
Well,
was
well,
in,
who doesn't,
I
right?
mean, come on.
Tina Turner, right? I mean,
I
come
was
on.
in love with that woman, her big hair, the way her costumes, like the way she moved. I mean, I was in love with that woman. She was my favorite. And I told my mom, like, I want to be her. Um, I didn't want to be like her. I wanted to be her. So that's a whole different thing when when you look at that from a child's perspective. But then a few years later, I mean, singing was something that I really wanted to do. And I was really, I'm a kid, right? But that was something my mom actually told me. She was like, yeah, that's not a career. Like that's not a career. Like you need to go to college and you need to get a real job, right? Like a real job. And again, like she didn't say it to be mean to me or anything like that. But from her perspective, that's what she grew up with, singing, movies, all of that stuff. That was not for regular people, right? Regular people go to college and get jobs and have regular lives, I guess. And so it took me a very, very long time. At that point, I stopped singing, like not because, yeah, okay, well, if I can't do this, then why should I do it? And it wasn't until I was almost 30 that I was in my late 20s before I actually started to sing again. And so now I'm 40 and I sing in church and do all of those things and all of that. But it took me a really long time to get into that place where I would allow myself to be open to do that. So as we go through and look at, a lot of times inherently we know, God has gifted us with this ability, this intuition to know certain things, but we get distracted by what the world tells us and what people around us tell us instead of listening to that gut. We get stuck up here in our heads and what, all of the messages that we receive and the programming. Good grief, I could talk forever about the programming of this world, but we won't talk about that today. And it gets us into this place where we lose sight of what's really important. And so I love what you're doing, that you start with the gut, you move into the heart, and then, you ask the logic center, okay, well, let's walk this through, but, like you're not in charge.
Yeah, I think that's pretty crucial. And I think going back to your comment about kids, it's so important that, man, you got to understand, like from 2 to 6 or 7 years old, kids are in theta state, their brain waves. And that's the same brain waves like when you're being hypnotized or, meditation or even dreaming. And so you're literally programming kids with whatever words you're saying to them. And again, parents are well meaning, but they're just passing on their limiting beliefs to the people behind them and in an effort to help. But, maybe it's not like I need to be so worried about teaching this kid all the rules that I've created about life. And maybe I should learn from this kid because, kids are fresh from source, right? They're fresh from that infinite love. And that's why they're so much fun to watch. And, if you're an adult and you can, keep that childhood spirit with your adult intellect, like that's, man, really cool things happen. When you live in a place of wonder and awe, that's one of the reasons I love nature so much. It's so awe inspiring. And it always just slams me into awareness, because, there's life everywhere. And, like I've never made a tree. Like, I don't think you've ever made a tree, right? Like, that's amazing. Like I've never made a bird, right? Like there's so many amazing things out there. And, whatever your intention is, nature will mirror it back to you. And, like if you have the intention of abundance, like it's everywhere in nature. And, like that's really the truth. And, if you're coming from a place of scarcity or lack, which is the opposite of abundance, then, you're going to live this, again, finite existence. And that's such a hard way to live. And it's frustrating because you're literally, oppressing yourself. And, it's just unconscious. And, unconscious behavior is what gets us on autopilot. It's like when you drive somewhere and you don't remember driving there. You're like, how did I get here? That's unconscious behavior, and that doesn't make you a bad person. But like all the data agrees, and I read the stat on the internet, right? So it has to be true. But 90 to 95%, 95% of our day is run by the subconscious, and 70% of the thoughts of the subconscious are negative. And so that's a really dangerous place to keep yourself. And so really just building awareness. And it's really simple to build awareness. Like use your five senses. Like what do you see? What do you smell? What do you hear? What do you touch? What do you feel? Like be present to life. And, like this is for Kevin too, because, I've caught myself like many times in the past rushing through things I actually enjoy just to get to something else that I really don't even want to do. And I was like, man, like that, I want to enjoy my time here. I want to maximize it. And I want to do the same thing for other people. But if I'm not present, like I'm going to limit my effectiveness.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yes, 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 and yes. And that the ability for us to, a lot of people like to say, think outside the box, but I just get rid of the box. Like, don't even let there be a box. Like, let's get rid of the whole box. But our ability to, and for me, it started small. I know, everybody has a different journey and a different path and different experiences. For me, I had to let that start small and start to look, well, maybe this much more is possible. And then maybe that much more is possible. And really allow my own struggle and difficulty with limiting beliefs and the way I looked at myself and felt about myself and all of those things that were very, very detrimental to a happy, pleasant, abundant life. They plagued me for a very, very long time. And so for me, I had to start small because there were a lot of things that I was battling and a lot of things that I had to get a lot of help with to overcome. But inching it forward and saying, okay, well, this is possible. Well, this is possible. Well, what about that? And being curious enough to not simply just accept what came in, whether it was a thought or something someone else said or, anything like that. Instead of just accepting what it was, question it. Well, is that true? Is that actually true for me? Because it's probably true for the person who said it, but is that actually true for me? And what does God say about that? And of course, so now I've reached this point where, and I know I still have work to go because everybody does. It's a journey, right? We never arrive. But I'm at the point now where I'm like, oh, okay, well, why not? Instead of saying, oh, I can't. Now the question is, okay, well, why not? Like who's gonna stop me? Me? Because that's the only one who's standing in my way right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really brilliant thing to say because it's so important that we understand we don't have to believe everything we think. Sometimes it's just a thought. But if you believe and identify with every single thought that comes through your mind, you limit yourself to like this fraction of your being, right? You limit yourself to the mind. And the mind is very powerful for sure, but it's not the entirety of your being. It's a fraction. And it's really important. You do not have to believe everything you think, right? And sometimes it's just a thought. And what if I'm wrong about this thought? And you don't have to have an opinion about everything you think either. And you don't have to have an opinion about everybody else's opinions. Like, so what? Like everything doesn't need to be addressed, and that's not ignore people. I'm not suggesting that, but I want to, be respectful of others, of course. But, just being really curious. That's a great word you used. That's why children are so motivated because they're curious. They're like, well, what's that? What's this? And like when you lose that, you're just trying to prove yourself right about whatever you think you know. And, like curiosity is the first step in drive. You've got to be curious first. That's how we've, evolved as humans, right? That's how we're still here. They're like, hey, what would it look like if we had a better phone than a flip phone and, or whatever. And thankfully we do have a better phone than that now. And, and so many other great things have come from that question, what if, or what would better look like? And the same question needs to be applied to us. You talked about that. It's like, it's not like taking over the world every day. It's just like, hey, if I didn't do what I wanted, that's okay. I'll just do better next time. And that's the goal, is just to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. And if I'm a little bit better every day, then at the end of a month, a year, 10 years, whatever, I'm going to be so much farther down the path. but if I keep trying to focus on everything that I want, then that's dangerous because I can't do everything in a day. It's like we were coming down from Mount Rainier, it's like 14,000 plus feet. And I was getting overwhelmed because I kept thinking about how long it was going to take to get down. And I'm like, dude, this is going to take forever. And I would be like really tired and frustrated. I'm like, dude, just let go. Just take one more step and one more step. And, 9 hours later, right, I got down, or however long it took. But it was a lot of fun because I kept letting go.
Absolutely. And like you said, we can't do everything all at one time. I wrote myself a sticky note to remind myself because I also don't want to put limitations on God. I have limitations, God doesn't. And sometimes I think we get confused and instead we try to put our limitations on our limitless God, which that's a whole nother conversation that we could talk about. But I wrote myself this sticky note that says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, but not at the same time. Right.
Yeah.
So it's that reminder, like
Yeah.
I am backed by a limitless God, but I am a human being and I am finite and I am limited. So while, yes, I can do anything that he calls me to do, but I can't do everything all at one time.
Nor would you want to. I mean,
No.
if we had all the information available to us, we couldn't process that. We would be so overwhelmed. There's so much coming at us constantly, and that's one of the biggest jobs of the mind is a deletion device. Deleting the things that it thinks we don't need to worry about, and that's what happens when you make all these decisions about who you are and who everyone else is and the way things are and those judgments that come with that. And your mind is just trying to prove to you whatever it thinks is true. And you get to decide on that. And so it's okay, like if in the past you have made these decisions, just make new decisions. And like our life is simply the final product of all the decisions we've made. And so no problem, cool. If you don't like your life, then make new decisions.
That's
And
right.
like it's okay, man. Have grace for yourself because we're all a work in progress. And everything looks messy in the middle, of creation, right? Like if I stop halfway through getting dressed in the morning and I go outside, I'm walking down the street in, a pair of pants and one sock, like I look like a crazy person, right? It looks like a failure, everything looks kind of like a failure in the middle. And, we're all in the middle of our lives. So, why is there a need to judge? Why not just be?
I love that. And definitely a heavy dose of grace for each and every single day. Sometimes it's moment by moment.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, it has been just such a joy and a pleasure to have you on the show today. I do want to make sure that our listeners can connect with you after the show. So, where can they find you?
Sure. Probably Instagram or LinkedIn, just Kevin Kepple, my name, or my podcast, Unlock Your Freedom with Kevin Kepple. So we love new friends. Say hi.
Absolutely. And on your show, Unlock Your Freedom, what can they expect to find on that podcast?
We talked to lots of different types of leaders, just how they've really, found freedom in their lives and whatever that looks like for them and whatever that means to them. And just really like, helping people, look under the hood of other powerful people because you know what, like we're all just trying to figure it out. So
That sounds like a lot of inspiring stories.
yeah, it's pretty empowering to get to really connect with just like-minded people on like-minded journeys.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Kevin, do you have any final parting words for our listeners today?
Yeah, if you guys made it this far, thanks for listening. We appreciate you guys. But I think one of the best things that we can all do as a skill is really be intentional about being kind more than we're being right. And if you can do that, like your life is going to get so much better because kind more than right when you're thinking about yourself and when you're thinking about other people. And kind more than right, that's the how of grace. And grace is such a beautiful word. And so you guys, I would also encourage you to connect with Crystal because she's a really beautiful expression of him, and she's just a really powerful woman. So you're in the right place.
Hey friend, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's my pleasure as always to be here with you. If what you listened to today resonated with you, if you enjoyed listening to the show, do me a favor. Go ahead and like and subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. Those reviews are so helpful. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate each and every single one of them. And go ahead and share this episode out with a friend. Invite them along for a walk through the Word, and let's enjoy that daily bread together. See you tomorrow.